Hi, I'm Vivian Guzman. Today on Dishin'it, we have a Coast in Hannaford's 1 in 20 most outstanding women. One who went from being sex trafficked to creating Stop Trafficking US.org. As a speaker, advocate, educator, she's tenaciously mobilizing the people of Maine to stop sexual abuse and the exploitation of children. Yes, Catherine Ann Wilson took her cause all the way to the White House. I'm excited to make Catherine's grandma's Scottish breakfast of corned beef hash and eggs with Boston brown bread. And we'll talk about resilience and how it just takes one person to help you heal. Welcome to Dishin'it. I'm Vivian Guzman. Life hasn't always been easy. I have felt alone, displaced, like an outsider. The world needs a place of belonging, which is why I created Dishin'it.
Cheers!
Cheers!
On Dishin'it, I cook foods from around the world. My guests share their stories, and we inspire the world.
The reason I save marriages past, present and future is because I want it to be that lovely, cute 80-year-old couple that you see still holding hands is the norm. Welcome to Dishin'it.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, good morning.
Welcome to Dishin'it.
Woohoo!
It's so good to see you. Thank you.
Someone's gonna make me breakfast. Yay, glad to be here.
So today we're going to be making your grandma, who was Scottish in background, her breakfast, which is corned beef hash and eggs with Boston brown bread. So tell me, what is the nostalgia behind making this breakfast for you?
Oh my gosh, it just reminds me of my grandmother. And the cool thing about preparing for this wonderful opportunity to be with you virtually this morning is thinking about my grandmother and looking at pictures and having all these wonderful memories about her. So thank you. You know, my grandmother every morning would have a little egg and corned beef hash, just a couple of tablespoons and an egg and a little brown bread. And it just warms my heart thinking about her and the way that she ate. She had proper Bostonian manners and taught me so much. But you know, she never made you feel like you were less than if that's not what you did. But she was born in 1901, Vivian.
Oh my gosh, you saw everything.
Everything. I mean, she would tell me stories of being in a automobile, which was a big deal. And they would have this little container of coals and with a blanket over it. And that's how you stayed warm.
How old was she when she passed away? Because I'm going to guess she passed away because it's a long time since.
She was 99 and a half years old when she passed away in Wellesley, Massachusetts.
How old were you when she passed away?
Oh my gosh, she passed away in 2000. I'm 56 and a half now, so I was older. You know, she spent every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's with us. And also when I would visit her in Winthrop, she would take me for high tea and at the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons, the fanciest hotels in Boston. We would go and have tea together and just see the people walking around in these amazing clothes in these beautiful places. And it was, I never felt like it was us or them or it was just a magical experience. I was just in awe, you know, of the people. And I wasn't thinking someday I'll have that or I don't have that now or anything like that. My thought was, wow, this is so beautiful, and I'm here with my grandmother who loves me, and this is just such a cool experience. But after my father passed away, she would come and stay with me, and she stayed with me until she was 95 years old.
Were you her favorite?
As a matter of fact, I was her favorite. I was the first grandchild and a girl, so she finally got to have a little girl. So I was born into such love, such want. They really wanted, loved, and adored me. And I continued to be her favorite until she passed. And now doing the advocacy work that I do, and learning. And this information has just recently come out. And so there's a thing called ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. I was speaking this, but I didn't know it had been formally tested, and that there's a word for it, and that, that Kaiser Permanente and the Center for Disease Control did a nationwide study, and it's a thing. But basically what ACEs is saying is children are like uncooked souffle or uncooked brown bread. As a human being, you are not done being cooked until you're in your early 20s. The trauma that happens to you before the age of 27, particularly as children, not only does that show up in behavioral issues later on as an adult, but your actual biology. But one of the things that makes a big difference is having one person love you. So two people, same age, same sex, same part of the world, they both go to war, they come back from war. One person needs support, needs therapy, but then is able to assimilate back into general population and is thriving. The other person just is having post-traumatic nightmares, episodes, just can't get it together. So what's the difference between the two? One person maybe had trauma in their early years, because we know 1 in 5 children are sexually abused, but had somebody believe in them. They had one person in their life, a grandmother, an aunt, a mother, somebody that said, I believe in you, you've got this, I love you, and they felt that. And the other person didn't have anybody give them that. The love that my grandmother gave me is the resilience piece.
I love it. Let's make some of her fabulous food. I think we should probably do the Boston brown bread first, right? And put it in the oven, because I already have the corned beef hash. So then I'll put the Boston brown bread to bake in the oven, and then I'll make the potatoes with the corned beef hash while that's in the oven. What do you say?
Wonderful, wonderful. And I'm gonna, in memory of my grandmother, I'm having a little tea in a proper teacup.
I love it. So I went ahead and I just went online to find a recipe, and I'm just gonna tell you how I'm making it really quickly. It's half a cup of regular flour, half a cup of cornmeal, half a cup of rye flour. And then there are all these other ingredients that you add to it. And then you mix up all the dried ingredients together, and you end up soaking some raisins, adding it to the dried stuff, a half a cup, and now you're ready for all the wet stuff. And it's only 2 wet things. It's vanilla extract, a teaspoon, and half a cup of molasses. Then I mix it, and then I dump it in the can. And then I just put it in a Mary's bath and put it in the oven at 325 for a little over 2 hours.
Yum.
Know what I'm saying?
Yum.
I put some a potato and some chopped onions, and then I'm just gonna add the corned beef hash, cook it together, make an egg, get the bread going. So I'm gonna listen to you, but I'm just gonna move right now. Yeah, how has COVID been affecting you? Positive or negatively? Like, what are the upswings and the not so great swings from COVID?
For me, as a survivor of nearly 20 years of many different kinds of trauma and abuse, there's this feeling of impending doom. So that feeling of fearing someone is going to kill you is very real. I mean, I've been choked to unconsciousness. Somebody grabbed me by my neck and choked me to kill me. And then when I lost consciousness, he freaked out and, let me fall, and I came to. So that feeling is very similar for other survivors like me during COVID. So in my mindset is COVID could very realistically be the death of me if I get it. That feeling of, if I get this, I'm going to die is very triggering. I've always wanted to live on a lake in Maine with animals, and I live in this beautiful, and I'll take us outside in a minute, but I live in this beautiful space. So for me, I've been able to use nature as an anti-venom to counter the constant feeling of impending doom that is so like what it was like for me as a kid. So that's what it's like from my perspective. What is it like for you?
I have anxiety and I placate it, so I channel it by doing more. But before COVID, I was traveling the auto show for 10 years. There was wonderful energy that you get from people. I'm a people person, I'm an extrovert. So the stage allowed me the drama, right? A presenter for Infinity and GMC. Hello and welcome to the New York City Auto Show. I had already quit because I was developing this show. I didn't even know how to begin how to develop my show, Dishin'it. A girlfriend of mine reached out to me that moved nearby that wanted to know about a triathlon. I had done one not that long ago in my neighborhood. I'm like, what are you asking me that for? Random thing. She lives like 10 minutes away. I was like, well, come over to my house. I'll make dinner. She heard me talk about Dishin'it. She said, let's do this. And she's a producer. She has her own show. Her name is Lenore. And she got me going. So I did like 4 or 5 interviews. COVID hit. Nobody's coming over. Show's dead on its tracks. So what happened after that? Like now, how do I film my show? How do I do this virtually? How do I achieve having these moments that we're having right now? Like to me, this is a dream, right? So I had to learn. So it took the whole vision of my show, Dishin'it, to go virtual. I've become more resourceful, met more people because people are available to you virtually now that you would never have. It has forced me to sit down and consider all kinds of options as how we can launch the show. I'm gonna show you my product, my final product, which is now ready. This is my meal. This is your beautiful Scottish grandma's breakfast.
Oh, that looks yummy. Oh my gosh.
We're gonna go sit down now. I'm gonna eat a little bit of this with you and we're gonna unpack more about you and learn more.
Oh my gosh. I love this opportunity to get to know you better and share my grandmother. What a gift.
I've been eating like a pig. I couldn't help myself. Look at this. I like mauled my food.
Yum.
I really love the flavor of the molasses, and I feel like it got crunchy, it got savory. It has the allspice, which is so good. It was such a lovely compliment with the potatoes, and the corned beef hash was just delightful as a whole. And I did use the ketchup like you suggested, and of course you didn't get to see it, but look at this bread. Look at this bread.
That is yummy. That's a licoricey flavor, and there's a lot of people who don't like molasses, but I love it. I think it's delicious.
I love it because it's not really sweet. It's kind of musky and tasty, and it has a little aftertaste, but it's almost like a burnt honey, and I'm loving every second of that.
It is a burnt honey. That's exactly right.
So, you have come such a long way in everything that has happened to you. I don't know if you want to go back and share your journey in Cliff Notes version.
I'd be happy to give you a Cliff Note version. You know, when people think about other people who've been abused, they think, oh, they had a bad home, they were living in, squalor. The interesting thing about my story is it really brings home the fact that it can happen to anyone. You know, my mom and dad loved each other. I told you about my grandmother. She was just an amazing woman. But when my brother was born, about, 19 months after I was born, he had life-threatening asthma. He spent the first 10 Christmases of his life fighting for his life in the intensive care for kids. My mom and dad was focused on my brother, as it should be. But because the attention was focused there, opportunistic predators look for, like I said, an opportunity. And so an administrator at my school knew my family situation, and it looked reasonable to other staff that he would take me specifically out of class. Well, she has trouble at home. He's just checking in on her. He's calling me a special little girl. He's taking me out of class, and he's sexually abusing me in his office. And so after that school administrator, it was the next door neighbor, it was the babysitter, it was the friend of the family, and men and women. I remember telling about the babysitter. I don't remember telling about the guy at school, and I don't know why, but I was bedwetting and waking up with screaming in the night, and my mom took me to the pediatrician, and they said, oh, well, there's stress at home. Nobody saw anything that was going on as indicators to sexual abuse. By the time I was 12, I had already been raped, if you can imagine such a thing. We know the average age into sex trafficking is between 12 and 14 years old. I'm a runaway from 12 to 17. I was sex trafficked at 15, living on the street, and escaped. From that first grade experience until I was 17, it is just a domino effect of just horrific abuse. And people who want to hear the story can go to stoptrafficking.org, and the video of the entire story is there if people are interested in hearing the full story. It was living hell, and I wanted to die every day. I didn't want to kill myself because I didn't want to do the whole karma or go to hell. But boy, if I could have had a karma-free death, if God said, "Do you want out?" there would not have been a hesitation for me to press that button. Yes, please, God, let me go. It's interesting now to look back. So nearly 20 years of abuse, nearly 20 years of healing and self-growth. And now this time in my life, as I'm approaching 57, the happiest I've ever been, and happier than so many people who didn't have, awful things happen, which I think is just a cool blessing. Every morning I wake up with a profound sense of gratitude because I know what it's like to be crawling out of your skin as soon as consciousness hits in the morning.
How did you escape?
You're not chained. And sometimes people think, well, you're not, nobody had a gun to your head. You're not physically shackled to the building where you're being kept. But there's another kind of shackle, and that is the shackle of your mind. So there was a warrant out for me. I was missing. They were trying to find me. And my pimp found out about that, and he brought me into the police station. I spoke to a police officer who was good friends with people who were child molesters. So he's talking to me, but he's not doing any of the appropriate things that law enforcement should do. He's laughing and joking, not asking about the pimp who's right behind me. And then my pimp walks me out. So it's not just a verbal brainwash. There's all these, all of these things, these experiences that happen that really concrete that belief, validate that belief that there is no safety. And so I was brainwashed into believing that I had to stay on this property. And if I left this property, for me, killing me would have been a relief. So the thought of being killed wasn't the thing that kept me behaving. What kept me behaving was a house that they had in Lowell, Massachusetts, where they did child pornography. And I don't want to trigger anybody, but they certainly instilled in me clearly what kind. It was bestiality, it was torture, it was that kept me in check. And then one morning I went out back within the property line and I prayed, and I said, God, I don't know if you're real, but if you are, I need help. So I don't know if it was the next day or 2 days, I don't remember, but at some point I felt the courage to walk off the property, and I did. Where I was being kept was in a place where it was very rural, and so I just walked and ran until I came to the first house, which was on the left, and I knocked on the door, and this lady went to open the door. As soon as she cracked the door, I pushed my way in and told her what was going on. She happened to be somebody who was a practicing alcoholic who was going to a treatment center, 30-day treatment center for alcoholic women the next day. Now, why she didn't call the cops, I don't know. She called the treatment center and said, hey, I'm supposed to arrive tomorrow, and this runaway just pushed her way through the door. What do I do? And why they didn't tell her to call the police, I don't know. So I slept underneath her guest bed that night because I was afraid that, the devil, that my pimp would find me. And later I learned he did go on a rampage, and somebody was shot in the effort to find me because I was money. And then in the morning, her husband pulled the car up to the door, turned the car sideways, and I bolted in the back seat and curled up in a little ball on the floorboard. And they took me to Crossroads. And Crossroads was for adult alcoholic women. It was a 30-day program. And I was allowed to stay there. And I stayed there for 3 months. So, and the rest of the story is a story for another time. But that is how I escaped. And after escape, my father passed away 3 months later of malignant melanoma. He had cancer that we didn't know he had. And after he died is when the journey of surviving the surviving began for me. That's when a flood of post-traumatic stress disorder kicked in. I could not tolerate drugs or alcohol, no antidepressant, no anti-anxiety. I can't even do Tylenol or Novocaine. It just doesn't agree with me. So my journey began with sitting with the suffering and then learning non-traditional ways of healing. And I'm happy to tell you on this beautiful day that it has been, I think 12 years since I've had a panic attack or a post-traumatic episode or woken up with night terrors. So it is nothing short of miraculous that I am. And I went on to, even though I never went to high school, I went on to make a 6-figure income in sales, and all of my dreams have come true. It's just amazing. And I'm privileged to be able to give back now with my little advocacy to give hope to other survivors and to prevent children from going through what I went through back then.
You're a tenacious advocate. You are so passionate about what you do. But what I marvel the most is StopTrafficking.org is a relatively recent organization that you created. So tell me what inspired that.
I was asked to be a speaker along with an international award-winning documentary person from India, Ruchira Gupta, actually worked with the Clintons to create the very first sex trafficking bill. That was 2002. We had no laws against sex trafficking or even the term sex trafficking until 2002. So she was coming to town and they wanted me to tell my story and be interviewed on the news. Now I went from my friends not knowing to being asked to tell my story on the local news. So I needed to tell Charlie. And so I told Charlie, I talked to my friends, I called the police and said, hey, can you find out if I gave them the name of my pimp? I said, is he still in Maine? Is he alive? If I'm killed, that's probably who did it. I came out with my story. I did the thing with Ruchira. And then I got involved in the local anti-trafficking stuff here. But sex trafficking was a hot topic and people wanted to hear about sex trafficking, even though that was only 1 year of my life. That got me in the door. And then that gave me the opportunity to give hope to survivors, educate our general public, and try to protect children from being sexually abused in the first place, which is the precursor to sex trafficking, to kids being incarcerated, runaways, addictions, violence against other children. The genesis is in the abuse of children. Last year, I got invited to the White House. Me and 20 people sat down at a table in the Roosevelt Room in the West Wing of the White House, and we talked about what needs to be done to protect kids. And that was just this massive honor. And that's my heart. My heart is doing what we need to do to protect children.
So what words of wisdom do you offer someone who's been in your position, who's either afraid to run away and might see this, or someone who has finally found their escape and don't know where to begin to normalize their life?
Most people who've been traumatized either feel guilty, like what happened to me wasn't that bad. Other people have had it so much worse than I do. I don't have a right to have these feelings. I feel guilty for it even being an issue for me at all. And they have a lot of guilt and shame around their judgment on whether or not they should be suffering or not. Well, let that go. Things that my father said to me, my father asking me for oral sex was more damaging to me than being hogtied and brutally raped for hours by a lunatic. It doesn't matter what the thing that was done to you is. What matters is your response to it and letting go of your judgment of whether or not your response should be what it is. Your response is what it is. Have some compassion for yourself and talk to people. You're not alone. There are many people. It is the norm. It's not the exception. And healing so that you can, like me, if I would have died all those years of wanting to die, then I would not be living on a lake in Maine with a man who loves me and a goose named Liberace, right? Like, and they have something to say about that.
Wow. You know, you are so inspiring. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to be with me. I revisited the conversations we've had before, and it made me so happy and grateful that you wanted to share your story with me and cared enough. So thank you for offering your friendship and your story. Oh, you are so lovely. I wish you didn't live so far away. I want to thank you today. I love you. I love you from my core. I loved you since I met you, since I heard your story, since I saw the way you showed up. You know, you show up in love. You show up with your heart on full display, and you show up vulnerable and open, and you had to overcome a lot to get to where you are to be this open. And I just think that is brave and courageous and beautiful to watch, and it's inspiring because it inspires me to try to figure out, how can I express myself? How can I show up and be? You help me level up who I am as well. So thank you so much for being on Dishin'it today, for sharing your story, for taking a chance in the pursuit of your dreams, celebrating love, diversity, and inclusion. I love you.
I love you.